Hokie Hangover live on YouTube, youtube.com/@Hokie Hangover Podcast. Oh, man. Syracuse 38, Virginia Tech 31 in overtime. Hokies were down Kyron drones. They were down Bhayshul Tuten. They had a 3-touchdown lead on the road at Syracuse. They gave up a bunch of points in the second half. 35 if you count the overtime period. 28 if you don't. Defense totally imploded. We're going to talk about all of it. Guys, what's going on?
I tuned into this game because I was house hunting for a good portion of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I tuned into this game just in time for Virginia Tech to completely fall apart. So
You did.
this was not an enjoyable experience by any metric. And unfortunately, we are going to commiserate together tonight. And this conversation's not going to be all that fun, but I can promise it'll probably be pretty entertaining.
Defeat snatched from the jaws of victory yet again, perhaps in the most extreme fashion that we've seen. Certainly over the course of the Pry era, maybe even deeper into the Fuente era. We can play this game as we go along, but no one leaves happy. And to which I say, to all the fans out there, I don't mean to attack anyone personally, but you can't tell me not to be scared of the Carrier Dome. You can't, Matt Masiosi. What do you do? For those of you who are listening on audio, the comments are getting out of control already. Matt Masiosi comments, on the eve of the election, the only person who deserves jail time is Brent Pry. So
Hot start.
Ouch.
Hot start in the comment section here. But either way, we'll talk about all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah, let's just start here. I mentioned on the preview that if Brent Pry found a way to game management himself out of a game against a first-year head coach, I would be out on Pry and the staff. I would like to formally announce that on this podcast. I am out on Brent Pry and the staff. Now, look, I am not one, as the two of you know and our listeners know who have been listening to us a long time, I am not one to be overly reactionary. I think it's fair to say. Out of the three of us, I'm probably the least reactionary, I'd argue. But I cannot in good conscience continue forward and think that this is a good idea. Now, with that said, I still want the staff to do well. I want the program to do well. I'll still be tuning in every week. But there's just a level of lowered expectations, and I don't want to call it apathy because I don't think it's that. I don't have apathy towards this program in a way I did at the end of Fuente era. I don't. But the one thing I'll say is, Virginia Tech is just continuing to find new and exciting and almost borderline impressive ways to lose football games. And what it comes down to, and I teased this a little bit on social media this afternoon, and I want to bring it up just one more time. Virginia Tech's 1-11 now in one-score games under Brent Pry, and as you guys know, I haven't loved that stat for a few reasons. Number one, because a lot of those games came in year one, and because not all one-score games are created equal. But Virginia Tech is now 0-4 in these this year. All 4 losses have come in a one-score game. And all of them have come, in a lot of ways, I'd argue, because of the coaching staff, right? One way or another, whether it's a game management gaffe, a clock management gaffe, not being ready from the outset of the game, maybe some play calling that we've discussed. And of course, it's on the players too, right? I mean, the coaches can only put you in position so often. It's on the players too. But Virginia Tech being 0-4 in these one-score games this year with the most talented roster they've had under Pry is what the problem is. That is the issue. And so it's pretty damning now. Virginia Tech is 0-4 this year. They were 0-3 a year ago. They have not won a one-score game since year one against Liberty. And the way that this is going is just really, really not in a good direction. You know, we can talk about off the field how Pry's improving relationships on the recruiting trail. We can talk about how there was enthusiasm among the fan base that we really hadn't seen since early in the Fuente era. Also, to be fair to this coaching staff, they inherited a mess, right? Like, this roster was in a really bad spot a couple years ago, and a lot of the young guys that Pry and his staff are recruiting are playing well. So, I mean, there are reasons to be optimistic about the future. But the issues that I have with Pry and the staff right now is that when there is a close game or it's money time, I don't trust this staff right now to go out there and play aggressively, coach aggressively to win the football game. Instead, they're coaching not to lose. And they've done that a few times this year with the most talented roster they've had, and it's in the face of expectations they had not faced prior to this year. That's my issue. Like, to have the ball with, you know, we can talk about the ins and outs of this game and how it went, but to have the ball with a little over 30 seconds left, to have all three timeouts and have one of the best kickers in the ACC on your sideline, and to sit on the ball and play for overtime when your defense hasn't gotten a stop in the last 6 possessions, to play for overtime and then to come out after the game, if you're Brent Pry, and say, well, you know, it was our backup quarterback, you know, we didn't feel great about it. I'd accept that answer if Colin Schlee hadn't played well on Saturday. But Schlee had played well. In fact, this kind of flies in the face of what Pry's saying. He's worried about making a mistake there, but Schlee was actually openly going out of his way on Saturday to not make a mistake, to the point where I thought he held onto the ball too long at times, right? And took some sacks when he didn't need to. So if you're going to have Schlee go out and play the way that he did, and I thought he played really well in a tough situation on the road, and then to not give him a chance to really gain like 35 yards and get Virginia Tech into field goal range, like the fringe of field goal range for John Love, it's unacceptable. You know, you play not to lose, you get burned. And they've done that a lot this year, and it's really made me mad. So that's
Also,
the opening.
I'll just say, like, in the theory of the backup quarterback, and we're not confident in this, like, generally in the game of football, right, and really in most sports, say you do think that you're the inferior team because of all these reasons and the guys that are out. But the longer you extend the game, that makes it less likely that you're going to win, it would seem, right? Like, if you're that worried, like, what do you have to your advantage? A kicker who can kick it a mile, and you're in the dome. Like, it feels like you just got to take a shot at it. And, you know, I'll be quick on my point here overall. But to Mike, you're saying you're out on the staff. I won't say I'm out yet, as the season has not ended yet. There's still 3 games left. How the team performs in those 3 games, I mean, like, I think no matter what, my opinion of him and the staff will, on the final day of this season, certainly be diminished in comparison to what it was prior to the season. And it's kind of just a matter of where we stand. The next 3 games is going to tell a lot for that. But at the end of the day, right, I mean, spin zone all you want. This team's likely going to land at 6 or 7 games. 1. The same amount pretty much that the previous coaches got fired for. And it's year 3, right? And when the question seems to be, because you can say all you want about, you know, the offseason stuff, and I admit that a lot of it's been really good, and that it potentially, you know, could liven the long-term future of the program, though it's hard to even know what a long-term future of a program looks like for if you're Virginia Tech in 2024, and that's just a sad reality. But when it comes to the on-field product, and you could reasonably say, like, all right, Vanderbilt, Rutgers, Miami, and now Syracuse, all 1-score losses. You know, insert staff here, what would their record be in those 4 games and in these games overall? And it's because of the way that things are going, because of the pattern that you see with one-score games, because of the mismanagement, seeming to just be who they are at this point, right? Like it's hard to shake off it's time to shake off the newbie excuse when you're losing to Fran Brown, who, like I mentioned on the preview, was the cornerbacks coach of Rutgers the day that Brent Pry got hired at Virginia Tech. Like, these aren't super experienced people either, but they've managed to figure it out. So, yeah. Do I think Justin Fuente would have a better record in these games? I kind of do. And that's not just to call out Justin Fuente because I know that's provocative, but insert staff here. And it's getting old, man.
Mike, you mentioned the game management part of this, which I didn't like the fact that they sat on it in the fourth quarter to go to OT. The more frustrating part of this was that they didn't use any of those timeouts while Syracuse was driving on that final drive. And they allowed Syracuse to milk the clock before finally scoring in the end zone with LaQuinn Allen. And by that point, Brent Pry essentially coached himself into a box where he was now going to ask his backup quarterback, which, let's be honest, I mean, Colin Schlee did play well in this game, and I do want to make a broader point about the offense. Colin Schlee played well, but he is your backup quarterback for a reason. There is a reason why he's a backup on a P4 team. Now, I wouldn't feel all that comfortable asking him to go win me the game either, but I would feel a lot more comfortable asking him to go win me the game if we had a minute left or maybe 45 seconds or something along those lines. But instead, you allow Syracuse to milk the clock and you end up with just a few ticks left there when you get the ball before overtime. So coaching yourself into a box on that one, I think that's kind of the more egregious mistake as far as game management goes. The point about the offense, guys, this offense has been much maligned for a lot of justified reasons. We've talked about the lack of development of Kyron Drones. We've talked about their inability to start fast for much of the season. This offense was missing their quarterback and their best player really on both sides of the ball and still found a way to score 31 points. Against a team like Syracuse, that's a game you absolutely have to win. I've seen some folks commenting on my column, which you can go read at rickytheblue.com, that the offense lost this game, which is just a laughable opinion, considering this defense, as our friend of the pod, Matt Maciosi, brings up, 35 points from the 7-minute mark of the third quarter through overtime. 5 touchdowns in 6 possessions.
And it was almost like a quarter and a half.
And they did it. They did it by running the football, which, let me quote some rankings here to you. Coming into Saturday's game, Syracuse was what in rush yards per game in the FBS? Can you guess?
They haven't run the ball well. Can't be good. Yeah. Sub 100.
Syracuse is 128th in rush yards per game.
I was being optimistic at 114. How about that?
And they were 127 in yards per rush.
Out of 134 FBS teams, everybody.
So this is not a great rushing football team. Now, don't get me wrong. I think LaQuinn Allen is probably an underused product, but this is not an offense that should be running the football against what has been, I think, by all accounts, a pretty improved rush defense over the last few weeks before this game. So for me, as frustrating as the game management stuff is, and I think it's all warranted, the more frustrating part for me is that Brent Pry has not been able to cement any of the progress that he has made on any front. Kyron Drones has gotten worse since he got hot last year. The offense is continued to be inconsistent from game to game, especially as a passing offense. The defense is far too inconsistent, and as we saw on Saturday, is really not ready for prime time. The recruiting stuff, I'm starting to wonder if that is just like a narrative at this point that we need to dispel. Guys, Virginia Tech was 10th in the ACC in 247's rankings last year, and they're 10th right now. Like, let's not act like Brent Pry is doing some Houdini magic on the recruiting trail at the moment. What he's done thus far, the results that we're actually seeing are not all that dissimilar to what we saw with the previous staff. So you have inconsistent and usually bad game management. You have a lack of sustained progress on either side of the football. You have a lack of sustained progress on the recruiting trail. What's getting better over time? The whole point of a rebuild is that you're supposed to start from a low point and then build upwards and build towards something and continuously move closer to that end goal. Virginia Tech's not doing that right now. They may take 2 steps forward one week and then they take 3 steps backwards the next. And this inconsistency from week to week is not going to get the job done. This is not the standard at Virginia Tech. The fan base is too supportive of the program. There's too much of a rich tradition here for folks to accept this. And I'm not saying that they need to press the button now, but we're getting to a point, folks, where the overall leadership, not just at this football program, but this athletic department and potentially the university, is going to have a wake-up call. Because, folks, this is not just a Brent Pry issue. This football program has been bad for quite some time, and there has been one athletic director in charge during that entire time period. And there has been one university president that has been in charge during that entire time period. And if I'm Tim Sands, who has, I think, in a lot of ways improved the university from an academic standpoint, if I'm Tim Sands and I'm looking at this football program, which is supposed to be a huge marketing machine for my university, they're not getting the job done, and they haven't been getting the job done for quite some time. So does Tim Sands care enough about the athletic side of the house in order to pay attention and maybe make some difficult decisions? Or are we going to get a long leash here for a coaching staff that, Mike, as you mentioned, is really not getting it done in any way, shape, or form right now?
I think what's kind of like befuddling about, the 3 losses that, we'll consider to be like the bad losses, true toss-up games. I don't know. We'll keep Miami out of it because I think they overall played a pretty good football game that day against a really good team. But whether it be in the first half against Vanderbilt, whether it be in the first half against Rutgers, really in both games, really the first quarter, or whether it be when Syracuse made, a bit of an adjustment. It's like the moment a team comes out not doing exactly what we thought they were going to do, it's like everyone's running around like a chicken with their head cut off, and suddenly a defense that would look otherwise consistent, and like they either make an adjustment too late or, they don't make an adjustment at all. But even still, it's like, how easy is it to throw this game plan off its rocker? And yeah, like Ricky, to your point, like LaQuinn Allen, Syracuse running the ball overall this season, like not great, obviously. Like those statistics totally reflect that. And as we talked about in the preview, like the expectation is going to be that they've stuck with their plan of throwing the ball 1,000 times a game with Kyle McCord. That's what they've been doing this season. But to not have a contingency plan for a back who had a 1,000-yard season last year, it's like he's capable. It is a possibility. And once they went to that, it didn't look like anyone had even remotely considered it. So I don't know. Again, it's frustrating because, you had a decade of Bud Foster making adjustments on the fly. Like it would work one drive and then it wouldn't work again. And just haven't seen it. Haven't seen that yet.
A lot of good points were made there last few minutes. Virginia Tech averaged second highest yards per play total per game in a game this season, 6.32 on Saturday. Only against Boston College was that number higher when Virginia Tech averaged over 9 yards per game. That's courtesy of Pete BVT. Great follow. Shout out, Pete. Offense was good Saturday, good enough to win. Were there turnovers there that were costly in the second half and kind of help Syracuse jumpstart and continue their comeback? Yes. 31 points with a backup quarterback and without your best offensive player, arguably the best player on the entire team, that should be enough to win a game on the road against a Syracuse team that, entered the game 5-2. We were sitting there searching for their best win. We had a whole conversation about on the preview. 31 points should be enough to get it done. The defense played great, I thought, in the first half, and played pretty poorly in the second half. And it's just kind of a microcosm of what's been going on here in Virginia Tech's losses, right? It's not always on the defense, right? Sometimes it's on the offense. Sometimes it's, a slow start offensively, then things get going. Think back to the Vanderbilt game, right? Defense was on the field. It felt like the entire game kept the Hokies in it in the opener, right? That, we were talking about that. It was like, all right, did Monsoor Delane have a bad game in the opener? Yeah, he did. Was it uncharacteristic? Yeah, right? But the defense kept Virginia Tech in the opener, and the offense didn't hold up its end of the bargain. The defense, I think, in a lot of ways kept Virginia Tech in the Miami game until the dam broke, right? Virginia Tech got a little stagnant on offense in the second half, and, things went sideways. Fans are looking for someone to blame, right? The thing where the part of this conversation that gets interesting, right, is what does Virginia Tech do from here? And let's be realistic, guys. I can say I'm out on the head coach. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. Like, Virginia Tech's not in a position to fire Brent Pry, and I'm not even sure they should, right? I can be out on the staff, right, and be upset that they're performing poorly in these one-score games, and they've underwhelmed this year with a roster that I think is a lot better than 5-4 and 3-2 in league play through 9 games, and I can be disappointed about that. But like, this staff isn't going anywhere, right? And I reserve the right to jump back in, right? Like, prove it to me. Like, go win the last 3 games. Upset Clemson and win the last 2, and go win a bowl game and finish with 9 wins and probably. Okay, that would be fantastic. We're rooting for it. But in a year, the first year you have expectations, this is the kind of egg that you lay. You get out to a terrible start in September. You're playing behind the 8 ball all year. But, we were holding out hope. We're like, all right, look, Virginia Tech, they got a tough conference schedule in that they draw both Miami and Clemson. But is it impossible? No. Can Virginia Tech go out and still have all their goals in front of them despite losing to Rutgers and to Vanderbilt? Yeah, of course. Like, for those of us that didn't think Virginia Tech was a playoff team, we thought that, this was, reasonably speaking, there was still a lot of goals they had in front of them. But then, you go out and, you play this way against Syracuse in the second half. You lose a really, really tough game against Miami, a game that you were in the entire way, and the way that game ended left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. But there was stuff we can point to in that game that was coaching related. The sequence before halftime in that game, that was one of the first things we hit on in the recap. Right? Was what the hell was Virginia Tech doing on the final possessions of the first half, offensively and defensively? You get a field goal, but Pry panicked before it and left Miami way too much time, and then the defense gave up a bunch of big plays. My point in going on this little rant here is that you can point to the offensive coordinator in some games, right? You can point to Tyler Bowen, who I think has been really, really good over the last 5 games. I think he's been good. You can point to Tyler Bowen sometimes and be like, all right, Virginia Tech didn't start the way that they should have. I didn't love the play calling. You can point to the defensive coordinator, right? In the case of this past Saturday, you can point to Chris Marv for the poor performance of the team in the second half and the lack of ability to make adjustments on the fly as Syracuse is making their comeback. You can point to a position coach. If you're really upset with the way a certain position group played in one game or another, you can point to a position coach and say, we should fire this guy. At the end of the day, this team has been inconsistent over the course of 3 seasons. They've just been really, really inconsistent. And Brent Pry had a rebuild that he had to undertake. And to be totally fair, like I said, the roster was not in a very good spot in year 1, and we knew it going into it. And so 3-8 was kind of a bummer of a result in year 1, but it wasn't overly shocking considering what Virginia Tech brought back on paper. Year 2, Tech got to a bowl game, right? And it's not the way we all drew it up, but it seemed like there was progress and momentum going to year 3, and I think there should have been. And now we're sitting here this year, and Virginia Tech is treated like this darling, where, this team is going to compete for an ACC title. This team could be a fringe college football playoff contender in the 12-team format. There are all these things that are being thrown around in the preseason. If Virginia Tech goes out in the opener on the road against a team that, yes, Vanderbilt is improved this year. They're going to a bowl game, much improved. Like that loss, I guess, is aging pretty well. But you go into that game on paper, and optically, it looks pretty bad. Vanderbilt, SEC doormat over the past half decade. You go on the road to play that game, and you're down 17 points in the first half. Like, there's just a lot of just data points that are adding up here. And do I think maybe I'm a little bit quick on the trigger in terms of being like, all right, I'm out on this staff? Maybe. Yeah, maybe I am a little quick on the trigger there. But also, we just went through a tenure with Justin Fuente where he was probably held on to at least 1 year, maybe 2 seasons too long, right? And put Virginia Tech in this position in the first place where they were even further behind the 8 ball than they should have been. And now I'm watching this kind of happen in real time, and it doesn't seem like the staff is able to get over the hump in close games. And Virginia Tech, Ricky, you mentioned the recruiting piece. We could talk about individual player rankings or team rankings or whatever, but the overall point here is that Virginia Tech is never going to recruit at a high enough level against the teams in this league where they're not going to be playing close games. They are never going to recruit like a Miami, like a top 5 to 7 team in the country. They're never going to recruit like Clemson, a top 5 to 7 team on the trail in the country. They're never going to recruit that way. So by nature, Virginia Tech's going to be playing in a lot of one-score games in ACC play, and you've got to find a way to win them. And the reality of the situation is, with the best roster that he's had since arriving in Blacksburg, this is the best roster he's had, right? We're 0-4 this year in one-score games. Every single loss has been a one-score game, and you found new and creative ways to lose each and every time. And at the core of it is either the team's not ready to play from the outset, or the team comes out at halftime, lackadaisical, asleep at the switch, or the team is not making any sort of adjustments in game, whether it be the first half or the second half. It's really, really frustrating in the losses, right? It always sucks to lose. But when you can continuously point to like the staff being out-coached in a lot of these games, maybe Miami notwithstanding, but you can still make the argument there because of how things went situationally at points in that game, it's really, really frustrating, right? It's incredibly frustrating. So that's where I'm at. This is another loss in a growing data set of them. I am done talking about the one-score game stat. I'm done with it because, like I told you guys last time it was brought up after the Miami loss, I said if they continue to lose these types of games with a talented roster, that's all that matters. that's all that matters. And we're starting to grow that data point where Virginia Tech's got plenty of talent to win, enough talent to win, and they're still finding a way to lose the one-score games. I think that's what's most damning about this staff right now.
Yeah, perfect comment here from Hokies Rock. Tech is 8-0-1 at the 2-minute mark in the fourth quarter, which is pretty comical considering Virginia Tech is 5-4. Mike, one quick thing on the recruiting point that I want to bring up. I know that you said Virginia Tech's never going to be Miami or they're never going to be Clemson. Can they beat Stanford on the recruiting trail? That'd be nice. Because right now they're behind Stanford. And that's not just your like total composite rating. That's average player rating as well. So
which is the one that matters, by the way, in the 247 sports formula, because it really doesn't account for that average recruiting ranking doesn't account for class size. It's literally just like the talent you're getting.
And
in the
you
class.
guys know that I'm not really big on recruiting rankings until signing day, but like Syracuse has 30 players committed for 2025, which is an ungodly number. Virginia Tech has, I think, 17 right now, but Virginia Tech's average recruit rating is higher than Syracuse. But you're getting beat by Stanford on the recruiting trail. I think we need to have some discussions about whether or not this narrative of Brent Pry massaging recruiting relationships is actually paying any dividends.
Yeah, Mike, so just to clarify on kind of like what your point on saying, you're out on a staff. Because I think to clarify here, there is a difference between what you're saying and coming out and saying, like, I fully endorse the termination of these people right now, today, this is over. But effectively what you're saying is, by saying I'm out means I no longer believe that this is going to work out.
I no longer believe that this is going to work out. And I think it's going to require. I think the shift, right, that's needed to get this thing back on track is going to require some significant staff changes that I'm not sure are going to take place. I don't think that Virginia Tech is going to fire Tyler Bowen, and I don't think they're going to fire Chris Marv. So the people are calling for that. I don't think it's going to happen. The reason why I don't think it's going to happen is because it's been very inconsistent week over week. One week the defense plays really well. One week the offense plays really well. Some weeks they both play really well, right? I mean, we're coming off of a week where Virginia Tech did not have their best stuff offensively, and yes, Georgia Tech was down. Georgia Tech was down their starting quarterback, but it was a dominant performance against the run when Virginia Tech welcomed Georgia Tech into Blacksburg for the homecoming game against a very good running back in Jamal Haynes. Virginia Tech shut it down, right? They shut it down. We're 1 week removed from that, right? I don't think that there is enough damning evidence, right, where it's like we're absolutely terminating that coordinator. There's not enough, right? Are they both inconsistent at times? Yeah. Are they both good at times? Yeah. Could they fire one? Sure, I guess they could. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be more like positional coaches, that sort of thing. And I think what Brent Pry really needs is he needs a guy. I hate to bring this name up again. He needs a guy like a Jerry Kill. He needs a guy who's been there and done that from a clock management, game management perspective, an extra set of eyes and ears in the room as a consultant or an analyst or whatever you want to call them. He needs that kind of guy. I think it's going to take some significant changes in how he's currently doing things. Is Brent Pry open to having that extra set of eyes and ears in the room? Or is he going to be more like, okay, this is my program. This is how we're going to do it. I'm going to figure out the answer, or the answer is in-house. Because, guys, remember, that's what Justin Fuente did for most of his tenure, right? It was, nope, we're going to figure this out internally. And then he brought Jerry Kill in, and it was kind of too late. Like, they turned it around in that one season in 19, but then Kill was out the door, and Fuente never effectively replaced him. And I just wonder, and Pry is very different from Fuente and in so many ways, but is he going to be even willing to do that? There's one thing to call for it and say that it would be great for him to have a guy who has head coaching experience on the staff, who's a veteran, who's relatively egoless, right? That's not going to come in and undermine his ability to be the head coach of the football team, but still provide that kind of guidance, right? That you just really have from experience that Pry doesn't have. He's kind of still going into year 3. There are guys that have a lot more head coaching experience, right, in the ACC than Brent Pry. Is he even open to that? So I am out on the staff as currently constituted because, number one, it would take significant changes, and it would have to be like a total heel turn from what we've seen so far in these losses. There's just a common thread. It's that Virginia Tech cannot get it done. They cannot close these games, and they got to find a way to do it, because if they don't, he will eventually get fired. He will get fired. The staff will be out. There's no question about it. You're going to be playing in too many of these one-score games. You need to figure this out. You got to find a way to close.
Your point about the coordinators not getting fired because they've just been inconsistent. It's like it's like the employee at your work that does just enough to not get fired, but sucks. Like, I think that's the kind of vibe that I'm getting from your point here, Mike, is that
that's
Bowen
Bowen
and Marv's units have been so up and down in their tenure that they've shown just enough good to make their boss think that they can get this job done. But deep down, I think everyone kind of sees that they're just not cut out for this right now. And I can't say I'm surprised. I think I panned both of these hires when they got made just because of the lack of experience amongst both of these guys. I mean, you essentially started a program where the top 3 coaches had no idea what they were doing. I mean, Brent Pry, first-time head coach. Tyler Bowen had spent like a game as an OC and a play caller at like Fordham or Penn State in the interim in like a bowl game. Chris Marv was Florida State fans are relatively happy when he got ran out of town and ended up taking a job in Blacksburg. So you ended up hiring 3 guys that were so wet behind the ears in what they were doing. I can't say that I'm surprised that we're at this point where we're almost 3 seasons in, and Virginia Tech has not been able to get over the hump, as we referenced earlier.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, Ricky, and we've said it once, we'll say it a million times, but there's no issue with believing that someone who's never done a job before could do it. But to put the 3 most important people in your organization in that situation at the same time is just so foolish. Like, you couldn't get one coordinator with experience, and
They probably could have.
they could have. They evidently chose not to. And you made a bet, and here we are. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, we talk about inconsistent results. Like, yeah, it's been inconsistent results. Here's the consistent result. If a team isn't very good, Virginia Tech beats the crap out of them. But, like, that's every win that they have is against a team that's not very good.
Where's the signature win? We still don't have one.
No, I mean, according to, like, the FBI
This
or whatever,
would have been the
SP
win.
Plus or whatever it is, the best win that this program has compiled is against the Georgia Tech last week, and they were playing with their backup quarterback, which that formula doesn't account for. So, like, yeah, you beat Boston College at home under the lights pretty good, even though you almost managed to blow that one. You beat Stanford's backup. You beat Georgia Tech backup. You beat Marshall and Old Dominion. Like, any one of these games, like, Vanderbilt's good. Vanderbilt was obviously a beatable team, though. Like, they're not as bad as we thought they were, but let's make no mistake.
Georgia State beat them.
Yeah, Georgia State found a way. Rutgers, not that good. And you were at home. Miami is just couldn't get it done. Syracuse, again, you had it in your hands and you blew it against a team that's actually not that good. A game that you were road favorites in, and when they took out drones, Vegas didn't change their opinion on the game that much. It went from Virginia Tech -4 to Virginia Tech -2.
Yeah.
So, for all you want to make as that the excuse for, Vegas didn't care. So, now again, you have Clemson, and we'll talk about that on the next episode. We can't even get into that right now, but I mean, if you can find a way, that'd be cool. But assuming you don't, then you have a losable game at Duke with a team that's probably demoralized, and then
if you play like you did in the second half against Syracuse, you're going to lose to Duke.
You're going to lose to almost anyone. But
yeah,
and then a UVA team.
You're going to lose to UVA too. You lose to UVA
deal.
playing like that too. Yep.
Same deal, right? So now and those games become so high pressure for like the pulse of the program in a team that's effectively going to be led by dudes who are out the door and probably unmotivated to an extent. Now, to be fair, the one thing you can give Brett Pry credit for is his teams have never quit yet, like on a season or anything like that. They've always played hard through and through. But again, that's just like sports, human psychology, all that. Like, it's teams will give up motivation. And again, in these ACC football games where the talent gap is never that large, a demotivated team or a team that feels like their season is already in hell versus a team like Duke, where they're at right now, just trying to pick up victories in year one, perpetual underdog. UVA, I don't know where they are mentally right now, but obviously there's always going to be some juice in that game. It just seems like it's a recipe for, at a minimum, like a very tenuous final few weeks in a path to get what will still be considered to be a mediocre result compared to where expectations were for the season.
Yeah, like people's minds are made up. Also, like the irony of this too is Virginia Tech builds a 21-3 lead in this game and played so well in the first half with their backup quarterback and without Bhayshul Tuten, their best offensive player. That's a testament to coaching. That's the craziest thing. That is a testament, a good testament to Virginia Tech's coaching staff, and then you still find a way to lose. And you can't even point to the quarterback and the running back being the reason why. That's why I want to pull my hair out. You can't point to, did Colin Schlee throw 3 interceptions? Oh, did Virginia Tech not, were they just not flat out not able to run the ball? No, you can't point to those things. Were there some turnovers that, the fumble is a killer by Coney, right? Like in the middle of the Syracuse comeback. Yeah, that's a killer. Is that the reason Virginia Tech lost the game? No, no, it's not the reason they lost the game. I'm sorry. Did Jeremiah Coney give up 35 second half points? This is a group effort on the implosion in the second half. A group effort. You go up 21-3 on the road with your backup quarterback, backup running back, 2 of your best offensive players out of the game. You got to find a way to win that game. You got to find a way to close it against a first-year head coach. You weren't able to do it. That's the bottom line. That's why this makes me so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think that Virginia Tech had a chance to win this game anyway. I remember we're house hunting, as one Haas says, when you found out Drones wasn't playing and then obviously Tuten not playing, what was your first thought? We're going to lose. That's exactly what I told Lisa, my fiance, in the car, because I wasn't sure about Drones either, and which is also like incredibly frustrating. The fact that Virginia Tech was able to hide his injury all week and for some sort of competitive advantage, and they still found a way to lose. That's besides the point. Virginia Tech played well enough for, I guess, the first 37 minutes of this game to win. And yet they still found a way to lose. And this goes back to the adage that is as true as the day is long. Good teams find ways to win and bad teams find ways to lose. And Virginia Tech, more often than not, is finding ways to lose football games, especially games that they put themselves in a position to win.
Yeah. Well, I'm not happy.
No.
So, I mean, I don't... Andrew, you just made a really good point. Like, you get back on the horse and you play well against Clemson. Okay, great. And then, hopefully you close out the year with wins against Duke and UVA, which Virginia Tech will still be favored in those 2 games. Okay, fantastic.
What? Stop. They're going to be favored against Duke?
Dude, Duke's, yes. They're going to be favored by, yes, they'll be favored against Duke. Virginia Tech will be favored against Duke. They're only a 6-point underdog to Clemson this weekend. They'll absolutely be favored against Duke. 100%.
Yeah, the football. 100%. I mean, again, the ESPN Football Power Index thing says we always got to turn back to this, but it's always a good way to say right now, what does some machine think the odds of this game are? And it says,
all right,
60+% to Virginia Tech.
All right, so Mike, you're a betting man, right?
Yeah.
If you could bet on this game, which you obviously can't,
Clemson
if you had to,
or Duke?
Duke. If you had to bet even spread, who you taking? Gun to your head, you got to bet on that game.
Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech's a better team.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Virginia Tech's better than Duke.
If you had asked me right now, if I had to pick that game, I'm picking the Blue Devils.
I don't think Virginia Tech has a coaching advantage in that game. I will say that.
No, and one thing that Duke has done more often than not this year is find ways to win.
Mm-hmm. And they've uglied some games up. I mean, they had Miami in the mud for 2.5 quarters. I mean, they dragged them through the mud on the. Miami was at home.
If there's anything we've learned about the Miami offense is that it is inevitable. They're going to get their points. They're going to give up a ton. Which is nuts that they gave up 30+ to Duke. That's comical.
Yeah, defense.
That Miami defense is horrendous, but the Miami offense is inevitable. They're going to get their points.
Yeah, and there's nobody left on the schedule for Miami that's going to be able to stop them. Number one, and then number two, I mean, when is this going to bite Miami in the ass? Probably in a semifinal. They're going to be, I mean, okay, cool. you made it. You made it one game from a title game, or you made it 2 games from a national title. Like that's when it's going to bite you in the ass. Okay, because Miami's not one of the 4 or 5 best. And this is a Miami podcast, but like they're not one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the country. I mean, they are, I guess, by letter of law, by ranking. But are you taking Miami over like Texas or Georgia or Ohio State or Oregon? I mean, I'm not taking them on the field against either of those teams on neutral site.
Yeah, I mean the real rankings are like if the games were played on a neutral field, they were projected out today. Like at what point do you make Miami the favorite? There are a lot of teams up there that I think would.
Penn State. I mean,
Vegas is giving that to Penn State.
Yeah.
Vegas is giving that to. I mean, it's a curious point where you'd think like, Miami's number 4, Alabama's number 11. You think that Alabama isn't favored against Miami on a neutral field?
Right.
Like, A&M, LSU, that's where it gets interesting. But
right.
Yeah, even still, like, they could have a tough time there in the playoff. But hey, maybe they'll prove us wrong. Make the conference proud because the conference clearly wanted them there.
I take zero pride in Miami. None. Zero.
I'm kidding. I'm being sarcastic. No one's rooting for Miami, Ricky. Come on.
God. I get so frustrated when people are like, "Oh, I just want the ACC teams to do good." No, forget them, especially Miami. Absolutely not.
No, there are some ACC teams that, in the circumstance, I would.
Like
for.
Wake Forest.
Yeah, I mean, I'd root for like NC State.
Yeah, depending on the situation.
Okay,
but like
you want to do
Miami,
should we do a power
Carolina?
ranking?
No.
Should we do a power ranking of teams that we would root for in a playoff scenario from the ACC outside Virginia Tech, UVA?
What team? Okay, well, we should start with what teams you wouldn't root for: UVA, Miami,
Pitt.
Not rooting for Pitt. Not rooting for Carolina.
Not rooting for Carolina.
Not rooting for Florida State.
I'd root for SMU.
I'm not rooting for SMU.
We were all up in arms last year when Florida State didn't get put in the playoffs. We've rooted for Florida State, but
I'm
maybe
not
now
rooting for
Stanford.
Florida State. I still should have thought they got in last year, but that's besides the point.
Yeah,
I'd root for Stanford.
I'd root for Stanford.
Definitely root for Cal.
Yeah, I can root for Stanford.
Calgorithm, 1000%, baby.
You rooting for Georgia Tech in the playoff?
Sleep with one eye open.
Comrade
baby.
McDaniel over here.
Georgia Tech. I mean, out of allegiance to my longtime podcast partner, Joey Weaver. Yes, absolutely. I would be pulling for Georgia Tech. Yes, I have to. Out of principle.
Duke, definitely rooting for Duke. Louisville,
it was a lot
barely
easier
even in the ACC.
It was a lot easier for me to root for Duke in the rest of the games on their schedule when David Cutcliffe was there. It's a lot harder with Manny Diaz.
He's such a good coach, though.
He is. He is good. Well, good coach, not a great coach, but
not yet. Give him some time. He hasn't gotten time anywhere he's been yet.
I sure wish
Temple didn't give him the time of day.
He didn't give Temple time, but luckily for Manny
I like
Diaz,
to rewrite history. It's election season. I like to rewrite history.
Oh
goodness
boy.
gracious. Goodness gracious. But no, Manny Diaz is going to have plenty of time if he wants it at Duke. Like 6 games in year 1, that buys him at least like 4
I have a lot more faith in Manny Diaz winning at Duke than I do Brent Pry winning at Virginia Tech. And that's incredibly sad considering the resources that Brent Pry has been afforded at Virginia Tech are considerably higher than the resources Manny Diaz is going to be offered at Duke.
Yeah, so that's
not
another part
comparable.
of this. That's another part. No, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, I don't mean to drag this out more than we need to, but like, you look for coaches who are doing more with less, right? And I think it's funny. It's funny in a lot of ways, all right? Because I think Virginia Tech made that hire last time with Fuente. It was doing more with less. It was Justin Fuente at Memphis, and it just didn't work out. But like, you look at these coaches around the country right now who are doing more with less. Kurt Cignetti at Indiana. Indiana was in the mud last year, and I know they haven't really played anybody, but they've beaten everybody on their team by at least everybody on their schedule by at least 14 points, right? And they're rolling. And Indiana is not historically a highly powered football machine in terms of finances. They aren't. Or they're in the Big Ten, and that benefits them and all that stuff. And they're a good basketball school that helps. But they haven't historically been like a highfalutin like fundraising machine. That has not been Indiana. you look at Manny Diaz, stay in the ACC. Manny Diaz, what he's doing at Duke, right? Year one. I mean, Duke is one of the most underfunded football programs in the entire league, and I don't think Duke's very good. But I think for Manny Diaz to be able to get them to bowl eligibility in year one is a pretty big deal. You know, to have them even in that game on Saturday against Miami is a pretty big deal. And then you look at Pry, and you look at how Virginia Tech has really pushed the fundraising, especially in the last 2 seasons of Fuente, right? Really the final year of Fuente, more so, because we were starting to really come out of the pandemic. But Virginia Tech was really pushing the fundraising and everything for the football program, you know, and locker room renovations, all that stuff. They were really pushing all of that through the new nutrition center for the football players.
Weight room.
And then the push for NIL and all this stuff, like the last 3 years. Like, the program's in a much better state now from that standpoint than it was 4 years ago. So I don't think Pry, while Virginia Tech is not where it wants to be in that regard, in NIL and all that stuff, certainly not where it wants to be, it's trending in a good direction. So I don't think we can classify Brent Pry in a situation where he's doing more with less. I don't think that checks the box at Virginia Tech like it does at Duke, obviously. So that's part of it that's really frustrating too. You know, I think a testament to the NIL and where Virginia Tech's at is the fact they were able to retain their entire roster from last year. They retained everybody. I mean, everybody.
All for 5-4.
All for 5-4 with losses to Vanderbilt, which again has aged well, Rutgers,
Which is
Miami,
not aged well.
Miami, which Virginia Tech played well, and then the Syracuse game against a year one head coach, who, by the way, Fran Brown, doing more with less. They're 6-2, 3-2 in league play. They were not very good last year. He's got them in a bowl game in year one.
Speaking of people I cannot root for in the ACC, Jesus.
Fran Brown.
Guys bitching and moaning about John Love taking field goal warm-ups at halftime while the Stanford band is making a bunch of noise.
Did you see Love apologize for that today, by the way? Which,
Ridiculous.
I mean, like, be the bigger person or whatever, I guess. Just crazy that he even had to apologize for that.
And that Syracuse, and I put this out on X. This is the second time that Fran Brown has like manufactured outrage this year. He got all bent out of shape about Brent Key saying some like super boring and benign stuff about the game's going to be decided by the players, not the coaches. And
Yeah.
Fran Brown got all bent out of shape about that. And then he gets bent out of shape about John Love trying to warm up at halftime. Utterly ridiculous.
Yeah. Do we have anything else? I've been bitching and moaning for about 53 minutes here.
I think we all have. Like,
I mean, is there anything else? I'm obviously very frustrated with this. I'm not, obviously, I haven't hid that tonight on this podcast. I'm really, really frustrated with this loss in particular. This was the most infuriating one that we've had so far. We've had some bad ones in the Pry tenure, but I think given the state of the roster, you're in your 9th game in year 3. You do everything in your power to build the lead, only to piss it away in the second half like you did. I mean, this is the worst loss of the Pry tenure in terms of just like how it went situationally without drones and Tuten, how you lost it. This, in my opinion, is the worst one. This is a really, really tough one to swallow on the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's up there. I mean, it's probably the worst because within the context of the game and how the game was lost, as well as the context of the season and what was in front of you, it's got to be the worst. You were up 21-3. There's still a path to 8 wins, which just feels so much different than 7 wins. You know you have to face Clemson. You know, you had the game in the bag despite luck perhaps being against you, and, you know, it wasn't even what made you feel unlucky being the reason that you lose. Like, you can't blame that.
Real quick, I gotta bring this comment up. Andrew Basom. First of all, Andrew Basom, I'm in a fantasy baseball league with him, and we have been keeping it alive. He went to Virginia Tech, obviously, Hokies alum. we've been keeping a fantasy baseball league alive for the better part of the last decade, and it's like continuously dwindled down. But we're both still in it. Anyway, he mentioned, to give Price some credit, the guys they've recruited, developed in-house so far look good. Basim, I don't know if you've been listening the entire time. We did mention that a little bit briefly in passing early. That yes, the young guys that Pry has brought in, Aiden Green, Caleb Woodson, Caleb Spencer, Mose Phillips. We can go. I mean, we can go down the list. All these guys that are young and contributing early. It's a pretty good sign that these guys are playing well. It's really just like the broader operation that's continuously pissing me off.
You don't get to use that as like a selling point for me in year 3. I need to see results in year 3, and I'm not seeing the results that I want to see.
Yeah.
This is a win or lose operation. Like your moral victories and your diamond in the rough or your shining moments matter in year 1, a little bit less in year 2. Year 3, with as many upperclassmen as Brent Pry has on his roster this year, it was about results. It was not about all the other stuff that goes with it.
Now, is it a good sign that these guys are playing well? Absolutely. But we'd be feeling probably a bit better about that if you were able to close games with the players that are like the regular contributors right now. Because like Aiden Green, I mean, let's face it, he's like the 5th wide receiver. He's been good, but like he's the 5th wide receiver. Caleb Woods and Caleb Spencer are playing more snaps. I didn't mention Asen Stevens, but he's like a rotational defensive lineman at this point, which is great. I mean, he's young. But like these guys were supposed to be like role players, right? Like contributors, but not like the guys, not the Drones, the Tutens, the Jalen Lanes, like not key guy, Aeneas Peebles, like the key guys on the roster. So it's great that they're contributing, and that's a great sign for the future. But when you're not winning with the requisite talent in the present, it gives you pause, and that's why the broader operation is really frustrating for me. Anything else?
Only thing we should mention before we go, 2 basketball games were played today. Virginia Tech women, they beat UNC Wilmington by a shit ton. And the men's team beat Delaware State by a lot less, but still 20 points, I believe. I think we talked about this before we started recording. None of us watched those games today, so not going to be able to give you much of a breakdown on those. However, we will be able to come to you guys with a season preview here at some point. I would like to watch a little bit of this team, both of them, quite honestly, before I start giving you my thoughts on the rosters, considering a ton of new players on both of these rosters, and I have a lot of questions about both of them. So not really all that informed based on what we've got right now and the fact that most of them did not play at Virginia Tech last year, but certainly a good night for the women. Men's was a bit more competitive than we would have liked going into midway through the second half, but Tech was able to pull away. But
it was 18. Virginia Tech was leading Delaware State 18-6 at halftime on the men's side. So it was like not what you want.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful.
Not what you want.
Is that real?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tech led. Delaware State scored 6 points in the first half.
Yeah, I think what's even more alarming is Virginia Tech only scored 18 points against Delaware State in the first half. I think that's the more alarming piece of it.
God. All right. Well, maybe I don't want to watch men's basketball.
Yeah.
And on that note, we'll see you guys later this week for a Clemson preview. Not feeling all that confident right now. I'll tell you that.
Why not? Go Hokies.
Mike, to clarify here.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think the box score was wrong there. It looks like it was saying no. The ESPN's all just screwed up right now.
There's no
way.
I'm
looking at the ESPN box. Is this not right?
Because the ESPN box shows that, but if you go to the play-by-play for the half, it says that the score was 40-32 Virginia Tech at halftime. But that would mean that Delaware State only scored 2 points in the second half.
We'll close.
Hold on. I have a way to settle this. All right. So Hokies MBB on X, which is the official account, shared a graphic for halftime. Virginia Tech 40, Delaware State 32. So it wouldn't be election season if Mike McDaniel wasn't engaging in misinformation.
Okay.
Hurting our audience.
I would like to say
just flat out
ESPN.
Lying to the public.
I forgot the show is like broadcasted live at some point. I was like, oh, this is all going to get cut out.
All right.
I'm like, oh, wait.
I acknowledge.
There's people watching us live. There's people watching us live.
Mike, you've been fact
loud
checked,
and clear. Thank you. I appreciate that. I voiced loud and clear that I did not watch this basketball game and that I had to catch up on it. I was putting my kid to bed. With that said, blame ESPN. Don't hate the player, hate the game. All right, that's what I'm going to say about that. This is BS.
We're gonna have
haters
to start,
and losers.
We're gonna have to start censoring,
of which there are many. Virginia Tech, by the way, Virginia Tech did not win this game 61-34. They won this game 83-60. I'll correct the record on the final score of this game as well. ESPN,
so we won by
go
less
to hell.
than we thought.
Yes. At one point in the second half, it was 61-34.
Just another example of the mainstream media getting it wrong, eh?
All right, let's quit while we're ahead. Good night, everybody.
Time after time. Go Hokies.